Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going on a bit of a psychological journey into a place you probably think you know better than anywhere else in the world, your own mind. We're going to explore the hidden architecture of false memories, and we'll discover why, when it comes to the story of your own life, you might actually be an unreliable narrator. Let's dive right in.
So, can you trust your own life story? It feels a little unsettling to even ask, doesn't it? I mean, you naturally take it for granted that the one person whose memory you can trust the absolutely most is your own. But what if your most trusted, incredibly vivid memories are actually fictions created by your very own brain? You see, memory doesn't function like a video recorder perfectly playing back a file. Instead, psychologists have found that our minds actively piece together past experiences. And because it's an act of reconstruction, it means that even after information has been committed to your memory, it can be totally altered.
Let's start with a really normal, everyday scenario just to see how easily the brain can be tricked. Picture this. You're walking past a person on the street. You see them clearly, but, only for a split second. Once they're out of view, you note they were carrying a satchel. You think to yourself, the bag was green. Yeah, for sure it was green. But then, a tiny moment of self-doubt creeps in. You start to ruminate. Or, wait, was it their coat that was green? Wasn't the bag blue? Yeah, actually, it was an eggshell blue. I remember now. What you're experiencing right there is how a simple suggestion to yourself introduces something called retroactive interference. Your recollection becomes completely skewed, and a false memory develops over a totally mundane detail.
Section 1. The Misinformation Effect.
To really see how external suggestions build on those everyday doubts, we have to look back to a groundbreaking 1974 experiment by psychologists Elizabeth Loftus and John Palmer. This introduces the main antagonist of our psychological story. They brilliantly illustrated how just framing a question alters our recall by showing different participants videos of a staged car collision. But here's the clever narrative trick they pulled. The videos were actually different. Some folks saw a car crashing at 20 miles per hour, others at 30, and the rest at 40. Then everyone was asked a simple survey question to estimate the speed of the crash.
Now, that survey question was completely identical for every single participant, except for one tiny little verb. Some participants were asked how fast the cars were going when they hit each other, but others were asked how fast they were going when they smashed into each other. The results were absolutely astounding. That single word, smashed, manipulated their memory so much that they recalled a much faster, far more severe crash than they had actually witnessed with their own two eyes. The specific verb used literally had a greater effect on their estimated speed than the actual physical speed of the cars in the video.
In a follow-up experiment, things took a pretty chilling twist. Participants were shown similar videos and later asked, "Did you see any broken glass?" Again, the verb describing the collision was altered to suggest different degrees of severity. The researchers found that the more serious the accident seemed in the wording, like using that heavy word smashed, the more likely participants were to confidently remember seeing broken glass scattered around the car. But here is the massive catch. There was zero broken glass in the actual video. A mere word successfully planted a vivid visual detail that never even existed.
So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that even the tiniest linguistic tweaks act as massive psychological triggers. In a later 1978 experiment, Loftus, Miller, and Burns showed participants slides of a car at a junction. Later on, half were asked if they saw a stop sign, and the other half were asked if they saw the stop sign. Those asked about the stop sign were way more likely to recollect it. Just swapping a single letter from A to the definite article the assures your brain that an object exists, totally bypassing our natural urge to question its accuracy. Which obviously leaves us with a giant question. If a single word can invent broken glass or a stop sign out of thin air, how far does this actually go? Can we escalate this from tweaking minor details to implanting wholesale, highly emotional fabrications?
Section 2. Planting complete fabrications.
To answer that, let's look at a fascinating experiment conducted in 1997 by James Cone. He was a psychology student of Elizabeth Loftus, and to snag some extra credit, he decided to test this on his own family. Cone put together these booklets containing 4 childhood stories and handed them out to his family members. 3 of the stories were entirely true, but for his brother, that 4th story was a complete fabrication. It was this detailed, completely made-up account of his brother getting lost in a shopping mall, being found by an older man, and eventually being reunited with the family. Cone had his brother read the booklet, and when he was asked to recall the stories later, his brother didn't just accept the fake story, he actively embellished it. He started inventing his own extrasensory details and rich emotions. He was utterly unable to identify the story as a total fake.
Now, this lost-in-the-mall technique was later formalized in a major study by Loftus and Jacqueline Pickrell, and they found that around 25% of the participants in this formal study fully embraced the fabricated memory. Just let that sink in for a second. 1 in 4 people adopted a rich, completely invented memory as their own, seamlessly adding their own sights, sounds, and deep emotions to something that never, ever occurred. And why does this happen? Well, because false memories feel absolutely 100% identical to real ones. Without some kind of independent corroboration, it is nearly impossible to distinguish a true memory from a planted false one just by analyzing someone's conviction.
Section 3. The mechanics of suggestion.
Let's actually play a quick interactive game. Listen to this list of words: sun, hot, relax, beach, tan, after sun. Okay, now if I asked you to recall the words I just said, there's a very high probability you'd confidently recall hearing the word holiday or maybe sunbathing, but those words were literally never spoken. Your brain just generated them because it reconstructed the overall theme and eagerly filled in the blanks for you.
What you just experienced right there is defined as the Diess-Roediger-McDermott, or DRM paradigm. It was established back in 1995. Researchers used this very technique of reading semantically linked words to reliably implant and test false memories in subjects. It's essentially the exact psychological weapon used to hack our minds, and it perfectly demonstrates how our reconstructive memory automatically leaps to logical conclusions, creating vivid memories of things that were heavily implied but never actually present in the room.
But here is a really fascinating twist to this whole mechanic. Researchers at the University of Virginia used this exact DRM word list paradigm to ask a unique question: can your mood affect how receptive you are to these false memories? They lured participants in with false memories, and then played music to induce either a really positive or a really negative mood. And surprisingly, they found that subjects induced into a negative mood were actually less likely to recall the implanted false memories. Being in a bad mood seemingly puts up this cognitive shield, protecting your memory from being as easily hacked by those external suggestions. Kind of wild, right?
Section 4. Memories in the courtroom.
So, what happens when this cognitive vulnerability enters the legal system? A place where accurate eyewitness testimonies are quite literally a matter of life and death. Back in 1976, researchers Johnson and Scott created 2 parallel storylines for participants sitting in a waiting room. Group 1 overheard a conversation and then saw a man walk out holding a greasy pen, so a low-threat scenario with no weapon. Group 2 heard a really aggressive argument, then saw a man exit holding a bloodied knife, a very high-threat violent scenario. When they were later asked to identify the man from a photo lineup, the group who saw the greasy pen had really high accuracy, but the group who saw the knife, their accuracy was terrible. This phenomenon is known as weapon focus. The presence of a high-stress, violent object severely degrades a person's ability to clearly recall the event or the perpetrator's face.
And this brings us to a really sobering truth, perfectly captured by Cohen's 1997 research. He said, "Our recollection of memories can be manipulated, and even entire sets of events can be confabulated. Because we humans possess absolutely no built-in true or false detector for our own minds, judges, juries, and the legal system as a whole are now strongly cautioned against relying blindly on a witness's conviction alone. The extreme confidence a witness has on the stand is just not a foolproof indicator of the truth."
This intense scrutiny also extends to therapy and the highly debated practice of recovered memories. Techniques that are meant to help recall historic events, like hypnosis, use intense suggestion and visualization to induce a trance. However, these techniques can inadvertently interfere with the recall process itself, generating incredibly vivid false memories. For instance, researcher Susan Clancy noted in 2005 that prior to hypnosis, people who claimed they had been abducted by aliens did not actually possess detailed memories of the experience. It was the suggestive therapy itself, which was meant to recover the truth, that ironically crafted the intricate, totally unbelievable fictions they later held as absolute reality.
So, as we wrap up our journey through this explainer on the architecture of false memories, we're left staring at a rather profound realization. Your mind is an active, tireless storyteller, constantly using actual details, internal logic, and external suggestions to weave a continuous narrative of who you are. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought. If your memory is just a story you continually reconstruct, how much of your past is actually true?